Well, hi everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Well, the model we would like to talk today is a quite kind of huge model. This is the Porsche 917, as you clearly can see, made in 1/12 scale by Mezzo Mix Model Christian Frank. He's a German modeler that makes his own models right now. And I like so much this type of items, because these are completely, they are not plastic injection model kit or resin kit. They are completely 3D printed models, So this is the next generation of how our type of modeling is going to, And it's extremely interesting, because when there is this kind of guys that want to try to do this new type of model, I completely trust them. So I love to build this type of item, And Mezzomix made an offer, I think nowadays, I think it's a couple of months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, something like that, about this. This was his last production in 1/12 scale. Last is really like the last in timing, of the production of 1/12 car. He already made back in time. I hope I remember correctly. Made the Capri, the endurance version of the Capri, of the Ford Capri, the BMW M1, the BMW M30, and whatsoever, also the Beta Monte Carlo. So we made a lot of interesting, very, very interesting vehicles, but more and more he moved to the production of the 3D printing. This is absolutely the future. This is absolutely how our model, the type of modeling that we are or making right now is probably going to have an evolution, to have the future in this type of objects, probably for a matter of dimensions. I think for the dimension of the machines, for what I know, I don't know Chris in person, I just know him since many, many years from automotive forums, time. So I think it's something that goes back in time. Correct me if I'm wrong. About 15 to 20 years ago, and I see that he constantly improved and improved his type of production. I like a lot of the way that he do these big and huge models, because they always give the proper dimension and the proper proportion of a huge object. When you switch from the smallest scale like 143 to 124, and you start to work not only 118 like the die cast are, the 118 is the main scale for the die cast model, but if you switch even bigger, so if you switch to 112, or nowadays they also make it in 1.8 and 1.6 also, they became really, really huge. And more than ever, if there is some mistake in the proportion of the model, the bigger the scale became, the more you can note this difference, So that's why it's quite so easy to spot in real life if you find a replica, maybe also even of the 917 produced by Kraftwerk, I think it was, or RCR Michigan. They make an incredibly nice replica of the real 917 car. Like all the modern replicas, they have the problem of the engine, because this monster had a 12-cylinder boxer, that was not coming from the ordinary production of the other Porsches. When you build it up, for example, 911, also arriving to the K3 version, the ultra turbo version used at Le Mans and so on. It's anyway a 911 based car, so the basics of the motor is anyway that one. It was this specific 917 that instead was a pure prototype racer, so the engine was not coming from anything else, and that's why modern replicas like today is not absolutely so easy to find the unit that is similar to this one. This was particular because when they showed up the mechanical part of the 917, we all fall in love to see this huge and big flat 12 cylinder engine, was impressive, really. That also became even bigger with the latest version of the 917/20, the Penske car, the version with using the turbo, the one that arrived in 1974, the Interserie version of the 917. So it's extremely interesting. That's why with the modern replica you can absolutely replicate, like in our models, the shape of the model, and that's why I was saying you can spot at once if there is some problems in the shape, some problem in the proportion between the cockpit area to the rear end, to the front end, to the overall look of the vehicle. So it's extremely difficult to make them in a big scale, I like so much the model that this guy is making up there in Germany. So, and I already bought from him the models that he made in my scale. You know, I'm a modeler mostly of the 124 scale. Of course, I can build everything in every kind of scale. For my customers, I do 112, I do 143, I do 120 Formula 1, I do everything, of course. But for my personal collection, I like to collect items in 124 scale. This was an exception that I wanted to do in my collection because I really wanted to have this monster, this special Porsche in my maybe never coming to life as a finished model, but you never know. You never know in life. So I just wanted to have the model for the moment because I think it's important when they are available not to lose the moment when you can grab them. We are not talking about this big amount of money and so on. This is very, very cheaper than the ordinary Model Factory Hero. Also, the Model Factory Hero made the 917 in 112, but I think is a different model, mostly because they feature a lot of metal part, a lot of extra detail, a lot of photo etched, so it's everything that became absolutely needing in a model like this one, but the purpose is a little bit different. I wanted a kind of compromise to have something in my hand that can become something like that. Also because when we are talking of such a big scale, it's extremely important to have an attention for the real details of the real car and so on. So it's very, very important to grab the pictures. And also when you grab the pictures, you need to have the correct pictures of the period because it's extremely easy, even more with a monster like this, to cross the modern replicas of the car. There is, as I say, the different companies making replicas and also several companies making the real racer version of the car. So, and they never ever show it. I crossed a couple of them in Monza, and it was the modern car that is racing in the Gulf color with the number 20 in front of this that you can see in every re-evocation of historical events and so on, but they never ever open the rear hatch to show the engine. I was in the paddock when they had the car hosted, but I remember that nobody dared to open and to show up what it is inside. Many say that probably there was a unit coming from a Porsche 993 biturbo unit, prepared for racing, something like that. As power of the horsepower, it was probably near to the 500, 600 horsepower that this real car had in the beginning. Remember that the real huge monster of the 917 was the American version, the Sunoco car. I don't know if it was Vic Alford who was the driver. They had the legendary version of the Turbo 917 that was famous nearly to wrinkle and to destroy the tires from the power. It was a problem to take the power to the ground, in the car. So it was an amazing vehicle. What Chris did here was absolutely incredible, I think. I have to divide this type of video probably in 1, 2, and probably 3 episodes because I like so much to talk about this model and to show you what I get here, It is not, I don't have any specific interest in making a good commercial to Chris because he don't absolutely need my advertisement. This is just my opinion, just my modeling opinion about what he did. I think it's really, really important also to help him in going on and going forward with this type of models because they are really, really the future. And Chris is absolutely one of the few one that when he said that he will make something in this scale, he does it. He produces it, he makes it by himself, and you see it's extremely artisanal. Look at the box. The box is really something. I love this. Vorsicht, probably means attention in German. It's really, really coming from. I don't think Chris is living in Zuffenhausen, but it's really, real amateur stuff, and I love it so much because it's really warm. You can feel the modeler making this stuff, making these items, So it's also from our side, from the client side, from the other modeler side, it's important to give trust to these modelers and to give them the encouragement to go on, to go further and make them, because I love this. Look how huge became this item. Look how huge it became, So I will divide the video in more than an episode, and I will start with the rear edge, not with the front part that I just prepared, because then we will see there is, of course, some problems about the material. You cannot expect that the person producing them by his own skill can have the same quality that you can expect from Tamiya, modern models, or from the most advanced Hasegawa or Fujimi stuff that make this stuff in plastic, so it is, everything is absolutely perfect. But of course there are compromises, that a modeler, because these are items that in either promote like stuff that you can buy in shops and so on, so you have to contact him and ask if there is something available about this car. I just remember that I crossed the auction that he made just in case, because it was just googling other different stuff, and the spot arrived. There is an offer about the 917 in 112. In the beginning I said it's too big scale, I cannot take it, I don't know where ever to place this, I don't have the space to host this car, I have to move my car from the garage, to place this stuff outside. I don't have so much stuff in 112, but the few stuff that I have in 112, it is of course this 917, the Ferrari from Gilles Villeneuve, because I am an Italian spaghetti pizza eater, mafioso whatsoever. So Gilles Villeneuve is in the soul of every Italian and every Ferrari lover. I am in the generation where Gilles Villeneuve was something, so I had to buy the Model Factory Hero 126 C2 Ferrari. Plus the ordinary 935 from Tamiya, that is an incredible, I think I have a couple of that kit, because it's fantastic, it's in the, and it's also funny to see, because if you can compare the dimension, as I did, I made a picture in my Facebook, when you can compare the dimensions of a 917 compared to the dimension of a Racer 911, 935 or RSR and so on. And the 911, despite in the reality was big, but not such a big car like the ugly one that we have today running on the streets, like the SUV and so on. It was incredibly bigger than the 917. So if you look at the body shape and the body dimension of a 911, is bigger than this car. It's quite bigger, quite bigger. I mean, it's about of 5 centimeter longer and 2 or 3, maybe not so much more larger, but at least a couple of centimeters larger. The car was completely different. You see that it was a different purpose where they prepared the model. So this was a pure racer. There was no intentions to make this like a street-able car. There was only one famous street-able 917. That was the silver one, plated Italian also, and then plated Germany, of course, that was owned by the Conte Martini. It was Conte Martini, that Martini one, that paid everything for the Martini racing, so he absolutely wanted to have his own drive from Germany to Italy, driving his own street-able 917. Unique example, the silver one. You can find the picture around about that 917, so it's amazing, but the beginning, the genesis of the 917 was intended to be a pure racer, a pure track terminator. This was the car that made the epical arrive in Monza in the 70s. I think it was 70 or 71. Joe Seifert, the 3-1. I remember a magazine. We had Autosprint magazine. It was a very, very famous Italian magazine of back in the days, that they used to make a lot of articles about this huge and impressive Porsche. It was really the main opponent of the Ferrari 512 M and S, but this was the winning one. This was the car to beat. This was the legend that remained probably for a decade, I mean from the beginning of the 70s to the end of the 70s until the arrival of the 936 Endurance Porsche. This was really the car to beat. So the 917 starting with the ordinary engine and then arriving with the turbo versions and so on, it was really the strongest car ever on the field. So it's a real legend, So the first part that I want to analyze is, as I say, the rear edge that is completely printed by a machine, and in the meaning, I think, of the producer, there inside you can see how the layers are when you mold this, when you print this stuff with machine. It takes several hours, and there is a quite a time-consuming activity of cleaning when you start really to take a hand over this type of models, because as you can see here, this is just a part of what I was trying to cleaning, and look, these are the frames, kind of sprue that is made by the machine, and this is a kind of section that you have to take it away. It's an extremely fragile material, you see, because if you take part of them, you see, it's like really to break a little spaghetti. Look, it's really, really easy to, it's strange, because some parts became like rubber, sometimes became extremely crispy. So I think it depends from the catalyzation of the items. It's also famous that when you take this type of models, you have to wait some days, because it happens, then the item kind of moves, you know, when you fix it. And that's why it was absolutely a great idea from Chris to place these big holes, probably to have a referring point to place a pin, or in wood, or in plastic, or even better in metal, you know, in aluminum. You can find it, you know, that is crossing the car. You see the pin is arriving from there, where you can still see the frame from the 3D marking, like in their point also. The same for the central part, and you can have the same points here on this part. So, you know, it's extremely stable to have the side part of the model that can fit in the same identical way. You also respect, you know, the squared internal part of the fuel tankers of this model, you know. Plus, of course, you had an external part that is in the spares, you know, in the other small parts of the kit that you can use to cover that part of the side of the model, you know. And as I was saying, you can clearly see that there was the purpose. He printed all these parts in an entire piece, so it's probably in the meaning of the modeler. When you want to build up this model, I have no idea when and if I will ever build this up. For now, I just collect the model, because as I said, it is important to keep them when they are available. This is something that I'm nearly sure that in a couple of years, of course, it can arrive maybe a Tamiya or whatsoever, making this type of model in plastic and something like that. I don't think that today in 2023 it's so easy for a manufacturer to think of something like that, but you never know, because for example wasn't that Nuno Platz making right now the Lotus 99 from Ayrton Senna, something like that? Am I wrong? So it is absolutely possible that they can think to make something modern with the modern standards of modeling. But I don't have any complaint about this. I mean, even if they will make it in plastic, I still want to have this one in resin, this one in 3D printing, because it's really a critical step in the going forward of our activity, you know. And as you can see down there, you know, there is a compromise in the basement of the engine, but it's a compromise that I think is quite easy to fix, you know, because of course, he made a kind of a barrier that closes completely where the engine was completely open down there. But it's also absolutely easy to follow the lines that you can see from the tube structure of the 917 and cut it and make it completely open, because, you know, there is the detail of the lower headers. You know, the detail is quite simple. You cannot pretend that being in a single places you make all the headers and all the sparklings that the motor of the 917 has. But remember anyway that being so huge scale, is absolutely easy to cut the part when you are going to clean it and simply take it off and prepare the motor in a proper way, you know, to make all the distribution and all the sparkling and all the electrical wires and cables, you know. And it's quite easy, because then you just have to refit it inside, like in the real car, you know, in the same identical position. What is impressive, I think, is these frames. The frames are really, really well done. It was a little bit tricky, you know, to clean them from the parts, from that sprue, you know, made by the machine, but neither so impossible. You know, just take your time and look carefully what are you doing, and it's absolutely not so complicated, you know. Also, Chris made very, very interesting. I hope that you can see there. The 917 was famous because the tube frame chassis that they used to had a kind of secret, you know. Inside the tube frame chassis, it was the oil circuit, so all the oil was running inside the body of the car. It was a kind of secret that many engineers back in time could not understand in the beginning. Then when they had the possibility to place their hands over the car, they understand that this was something extremely advanced in. Remember, we are talking of a car that started in 1979 as a project, you know, arriving in the 70s and racing in the 70s. So racing car, they didn't have the documentation, and they didn't have the possibility to share information, probably neither the volunteer to share the information about a winning racer. When you have a winning racer, you don't want anybody to see anything about your car. You want anybody to know anything about you. You just want her to win as much as you can, you know, because it's a giant investment. This was something that was a milestone in the production of Porsche. Many say that still part of the engine of this car, like camshaft and so on, is still noted like something that is the perfection in automotive. You know, the camshaft is usually made by machines today, you know, but back in the days this stuff was completely handmade. So this was really a masterpiece in the history of motorsport, you know. And So that's it. The detail is absolutely really well done. Of course you can improve, but this is a 1/12 scale, so everything is possible. You can of course open that part and also make it bigger for the side of the side tankers. You know, this was the place for the battery. I go by memory because I just made this model in the full open version with the Fujimi 917 using part of the Union Heller 917 for the mechanical and so on, because as you well know, the Fujimi model don't have the basement of the model, just have a mock-up that is showing part of the gearbox and part of the upper vent with the big propeller fan over here, you know, but there is no engine inside. And the motor was instead present in the model of the Union Heller, you know, so I keep that part and they made a full detail kit of that. And in 1/24 scale, honestly, you cannot see, you see part of the motor, but you cannot see so much, because also remember that when the rear hatch is in the position, you have something like this, you know, something like this, so you can detail as much as you want, and probably you just have to detail much more than ever and possible what you can see from behind the model, you know, taking picture like something like this. You can open it, there is the picture, I think it was yeah, should be Vic Helford, wasn't that, of the guy in Le Mans nearly swimming inside the giant motor bay of the 917, and I think it was Vic Helford in Le Mans, you know. But what you can see from up here is this part, you know, is something like that. And even more in this model, it should be useful to study something. It's not so easy because the part is anyway in resin and quite heavy, you know, so we are talking of several grams here. It is not like the plastic of the Fujimi kit. You have to study something that if you want to keep it workable, because you mean to take all the detail of the engine bay, you have to think something absolutely reliable that cannot break at the second time that you open it. So it's another step that is not so easy to think, you know, you have to think about this stuff. So probably the assembly of this model have to be done little by little and step by step, also thinking how to divide the parts and how to show when it is complete, you know, because also, of course, you can also make this one as a completely curbside model, you know, but there is a lot of opening parts, and honestly there is a lot of basics details for all the inner part, you know. Of course it requires a lot of work, but it is not such a big issue, you know. About the 917 today we have millions of books and pictures and documentation, you know, so you just find the example that you want to copy, you just find the type that you want to copy, and just let's go for it and just copy what you are seeing, you know, with the hope that you are crossing a real one and not a refurbished or a replica car. That today is extremely easy, you know, but you always have to check very carefully the sources, you know. What is interesting, going longer with the video, now we are 22 minutes, maybe if you are still here, it means that you are really interested in what I'm saying, you know. And what I wanted just to show you it is that for example, when people talk about the 3D model, you know, and I don't know if it is so easy to see, let me see from the camera of my telephone, you know, but you see that there is a lot of micro lines there. That is the layers of the printer that in this side have been taken away. That's so easy to fix like an issue, because many guys are scared because they say, but you know, the model in 3D are famous to have this kind of lines, you know. It's like, listen to the sound. The sound is like if you take a nail over a vinyl record, you know. There is micro lines and so on, but they are extremely easy to correct, because being the resin, I suspect constantly after catalyzation, they are quite famous because the resin models, you have to wait a little, in my opinion, before you start to build them up, because it's so easy, you know, when you get the model that is in your dream and they just exist like a 3D, you say, okay, I get the model, tomorrow I start with the model and it will take for me 5 years to finish it, okay. But I suspect it's always better to wait a little more, because I suspect that the catalyzation of this type of resin takes a little longer time than the ordinary resin and so on. To take away the layers anyway, during this catalyzation, the resin is not hard at all. I mean, it's like ordinary plastic, you see? The peel is exactly like an ordinary piece of plastic, you see? And inside the NAC air intake here, I still have, let's focus it. I still have the layers, as you can see, and the pins coming from the molding and so on. There you can still see some lines, but you see it's quite easy to correct them, just taking one of these sand sponges, you know. This is an ordinary one that you can find in every Walmart or stuff, any kind of shop selling stuff for bricolage and home stuff, you know. And you see, just making this stuff little by little, I'm making that just with one hand, is extremely easy to take the surface completely smooth and completely, look, you see. And I'm not pushing this, so this is just for the video purpose. It is not something that I'm making in the serious way to keep it completely smooth, you know. But it's so easy because you see already here, you don't have any longer, listen, the difference of the sound. That is steel with the layer. Here the layer is gone. You still can see a little the line, because the more you go further, the more you can keep it aligned, you know. Of course, this is a line of the mold that is a little more engraved, you know, so requires a little more sanding, but it's extremely easy, and it's really a pleasure, you know, because I don't know if you are full like I am about cars, probably yes, being here, you know, but it's also very typical for us car lovers that you caress sometimes the body of your car and to see if the carrosserie, if the body is perfectly smooth and perfectly straight, if there is not some scratches and so on. And this is exactly the same situation, so it's nearly pleasure to do this kind of work, you know. Of course, also with the finger, this is a kind of experience that I made building up planes, you know, because in the plane fuselage, this is critical, you know. When you place the finger over this, there should be absolutely no steps, no lines, no different levels, you know, so just required to be a little bit sanded, but it is not such big issues, you know. Always remember what you have in your hands. You have the unique model of the most important racer of all the time, you know, so it's absolutely amazing. This molding line, that many can say, hey, this is a huge problem. This is not at all a huge problem. It's just enough to use ordinary Tamiya filler, or even better if you have the Squadron putty, that is even better, you know, and fill it up, and then just decide how do you want to make it smooth or not, you know. I didn't get with it, but I know that Chris also made a version of the 917 with even wider rear part for even wider tires and so on. This is the ordinary part. I think it was the 1970 car, you know, and I think it's perfect because I would like to do some of the early version, the one that win like really like a Terminator in Monza, you know, and that arrival was dramatic for Italians. I suspect that was the occasion. That was the occasion when those cars were winning in Monza, that Ferrari had instead a kind of defeat. And a lot of tifosi were complaining about Ferrari, about the performance of the car, when Ferrari said, you know what, I don't give a fuck, guys. I will never be back in this track, and I will never be back on track to listen to your complaints. So the behavior and the personality of all the Ferrari really arrived, because he cannot stand, of course, to see this monster arriving and winning against them. But, you know, as I wrote in one of my posts, despite I am GT40 Model Works, I started from a GT40 forum like I love GT40, because they know that I was completely mad and freak about the GT40, the car that is in my heart, of course. But I basically became the kind of Porsche guy, so everything that is related to Porsches, I would like to build up in scale. Of course, special Porsches and not the ordinary street car. Lucky the guy that owned it, but I don't give a shit about that. I just like a lot the racer and the history that they made, the history and the performance, because it was the first enemy that we had, like Italians, you know. We had this small company, not the big Porsche that is today. Porsche, Volkswagen, Audi is the same group, Lamborghini is the same group, but back in time it was really this small group from Germany that was coming down and trying everything they could to try to win against the big Ferrari, you know. So for me, this is really something that I absolutely need to have in my collection. You see, also the frames are absolutely nice to see, you know. Then you have to study, because I suspect there is some parts that must be modified. I'm not so sure about this type of frame, because I don't remember them in the picture of the time, but probably if he made this, probably he knows the car much better than me, working in such a big scale. So that's it for now. This was the first part of this adventure inside the 3D modeling. Down there we have the second part, then the third part. Then if you want, because I also took from him, I like Christian stuff, absolutely, another version of the 91710 to make probably a Brumos car, probably something American with this 917. It was the car that I modified in 1/24 scale. This is the 1/24. Yep, 124 scale. I modified my first one to do Herbie Muller Martini racing car. I would like to build this up into an American version, you know, so it will become something American this time. And then here, this other big box here, it is just the other stuff like the wheels, the interior, the seat, the steering wheel. There is a lot of parts, everything molded in 3D that I would like to show you. So thank you for watching, guys. Thank you to surviving if you did until this 30 minutes of my terrible speech, and see you in the next one.